Spotlight, where every single week we do our very best to help you, the business owner, dive deeper into what it means to be an entrepreneur. Because we know, just like you know, that the small business is the backbone of every community. This episode and all of our episodes are powered by Greg Fay Insurance. Be sure to talk to them today for your free quotes. Greg, why don't you tell everybody who's on the podcast today?
Well, I let the cat out of the bag when we were in the virtual green room about having our first international guest because he has business that's gone international. I put together a little a biography because I just thought it warranted reading kind of a little bit about Dave, and we'll get to learn a lot more about Dave. But today, Tony and I are joined by David Schardt, one of the founders and president of Forgeline Forged Ally Wheels. If you're into performance car racing or high-end builds, you've definitely seen or run Forgeline wheels. Dave grew up in the wheel business, raced professionally in series like IMSA and SCCA, and in the mid-90s helped start Forgeline with his twin brother after realizing racers needed better, stronger, and truly more custom wheels. More than 30 years later, Forgeline is still building everything to order in the US and pushing the limits of wheel design. I'm so excited to dig into his story and what goes into making wheels at that level. Dave, welcome to our podcast, and thank you for being a guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know, David, as we think about all the different areas of entrepreneurship that we've dove into in the podcast since we started, it's really one of those things where it's never been this niche before. And so I'm curious, like, when did you decide, man, I think I want to start a business that's all centered around custom racing wheels?
Yeah, well, Steve and I both grew up in the wheel business. So my dad used to race and was a GM engineer when we were young, and then he was redoing wire wheels, rebuilding and restoring wire wheels for like Austin Healey's and TR6s and Jaguars and that kind of stuff in his garage. So he was buying those parts and spokes and stuff like that from Dayton Wire Wheel. And one day in 1970, he went down there and Dayton Wire Wheel had been locked up by the bank. And he just couldn't believe a business that had been around since 1916 and was supplied the entire IndyCar field in the 50s, and that kind of stuff, could go out of business. So he managed to work a deal. He can't do this kind of thing these days, but you could back then. Made a deal with the bank and the vendors and was able to take that business over and resurrected Dayton Wire Wheel. And Steve and I worked there in middle school, high school, college, all through doing the worst jobs you could possibly imagine in the factory, but learning a lot about the wheels and that kind of stuff. Out of college, I actually started a wheel distribution business with Dayton Wire Wheel, obviously, and then a lot of other BBS and Momo and some other big brands. There wasn't a lot of distribution in this part of the country. It was mostly in California, and you had to bring everything in from California or Florida on some of those big brands. And so they were all willing to work with me on that. And so I did that for a couple of years. And during that time, I recognized the fact that, and I was racing as well on a semi-pro kind of amateur level. And we were seeing two things. There wasn't a racing wheel out there. Getting true custom built offset with racing wheels that would fit over big brakes and that kind of stuff was very, very difficult. Like BBS was the only people doing it. And they only wanted to talk to big teams, and amateur racing and grassroots racing, road racing and stuff was really growing at that time. So people were literally cutting apart wheels and welding sections in them and grinding their brakes down to make the wheels fit over them and that kind of stuff. And so we saw an opportunity. It's like, well, we can, let's start a racing wheel business offering custom offset wheels that'll fit over these big brakes. So that's how that started. So I still have my distribution business, but Steve and I started Forgeline about 2-3 years later, and we did the distribution side of that brand. And that Forgeline was very, very small for a lot of years, but it took off relatively quickly to a certain degree, but not until about 10-15 years ago that it really got me.
So you had the benefit of working entry level, like you said, all the jobs. We talk about entrepreneurs in this business right here that no matter where you're at in the business, at some point in time, you've been the janitor, you've been the IT guy, you've been the finance guy, the chief cook, bottle washer, all that stuff there. You had a chance to do that under the mentorship of your dad. And that I can't imagine the value that you recognize there. What are a couple lessons that you learned when working with your dad that you and your brother said, oh, this one is going into whatever operation we start out and take off with, these principles are moving forward with that business?
Yeah, back then when we were young, I don't think we realized any of it. I mean, we hated it. I'll be honest. No, but when you actually start a business of your own, you realize a lot of the things that you learned back then. But in reality, he 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 really treated the employees with respect and really treated them well. Gave them a lot of amnesty. Let them figure out problems on their own and that type of stuff. It's more of a guidance thing um, than than being just a ruler and telling everybody how they had to do everything. And we run that business. We've always run the business the same exact way. We treat our employees very well with a lot of respect.
David, one of the things that's interesting about the kind of work that you do is that you've become known for precision. And precision in today's world feels like a thing of the past in a lot of ways. Like, people don't care about the details the same way, but yet in a custom order kind of industry where, millimeters matter, how do you guys get the culture to buy into the precision manufacturing that you guys do?
Most of the people here are car guys, and they kind of understand it, especially on the racing side. They're proud to work here. They're proud to see. We take them to the racetrack. We'll take them to an event at Mid-Ohio. Sometimes we try to take them to Daytona to spend time with those race teams to see how serious that is and what the wheels have to endure in a 24-hour race, that type of stuff. And I think that really comes across to them at that point that this stuff needs to be right. We can't make mistakes on it.
Well, I tell you, I want to double back to I love the question that Tony asked, because one of the things, there was a big tell in what you said. You said that your employees are very proud of what they do, and it's because of how you immerse them in the industry. But I've got to go back to something that you said that you and your brother learned from your dad, or at least you observed it, that your dad gave people a lot of autonomy to do what they needed to do. He had a high level of trust in them, and he let them work through things. I've got to believe that has something to do with the pride that you talked about that they exhibit with your product and with your culture.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I absolutely agree with that. They're very proud because they've bought into it, because a lot of it is their ideas. They came up with the ideas, and and sometimes we have to change a couple of things, and it doesn't always work. But giving them the autonomy to do those type of things really gives them some buy-in.
One of the interesting things about your particular setup is that you are owner, founder, partner with your brother. We've got a lot of guests on who are partners with their spouses.
Yeah.
I love my brother. I don't know that we could run a business together. Talk to us about the process and settling family arguments, or deciding which direction you're going to go, or even just, maybe just even like deciding the logo, right? Like, how does those kind of decisions been made when, if you've got a brother, you know all that's involved in that. Take us through how you manage that relationship.
Yeah, so in the beginning, and in reality, Steve started the business with my help, Wheel Source, in the same building that we're in. But it was within that first year that I came into the business with him, because he's really good salesman, best salesman I know. But as far as running a business and that type of stuff, it's just not really his thing, and he'll tell you that. But in the beginning, those first couple of years when we were together, first 4 years, it wasn't pretty. I mean, we would argue about anything. We were much younger then, and pig-headed and argued, and it really actually got to a point about 4 years in where I said, man, either you buy me out or I buy you out or whatever, but I don't think this is going to work. Steve actually had another job. He had kept his other job, and so we wheel sourced my other business, Forgeline, and so I was by myself for probably 7 years with the business under the Wheel Source brand. And then the business I was at a point where I really needed some help, especially on the sales side, to grow the business, and I just couldn't find that right person. And I'd sit home with my wife and ask me, how are we going to find somebody? And we'd list all the attributes of the person that we thought was the perfect person, and obviously it kept coming back to him. So I called him one day, or sat down, we went to dinner, and he had regretted leaving, and it was really tough, like at Christmases and stuff like that, when we talked about the business and he wasn't part of it. It was tough on him, it was tough on me. So I said, hey, I'd love to bring you back into business. I think you're the right person to sales, but I only want you to run the sales. You can't interfere with any other part of the business. And so he said, well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, all I want to do is sales. I don't want to have to mess with anything else. So that's what we still do today. I run the operations of the business. He runs the majority of all the sales, really. And that's worked out really well. We just stay out of each other's way.
Boy, Tony, the common thread.
Sure, it does help. Older helps. Older always helps.
Boy, Tony, the common thread here through all of the episodes that we did with all of the business owners that we've had, and they all seem to echo in some way, shape, or form that's particular to their business. They echo the need to stay in a particular lane. There's a certain set of gifts that one has, whether it's brother, whether it's husband, wife, or just business partner. The successful ones that have endured, have grown, have thrived, have all figured out what everybody's role is, how everybody excels at the particular skill set that they have. And it's just really refreshing to hear you kind of repeat the same thing, because sometimes business owners, they can hear things and they think, oh, that doesn't apply to me. That wouldn't work with us. Sure, it's worked for Dave and his brother, but it wouldn't work. So I wanted to give you props there and just point out to our audience that is just a common thread. I saw on Facebook today that you received a very large shipment of what looked to be a very technical piece of business. I know Eric Horseman was messing with you a little bit, saying that it looked like that you overdid it on the cappuccino maker, but I've got to believe that piece of equipment does far more than make cappuccino.
Yeah, that is a very large 5-axis machine that we're going to feed with a robot, and that's going to be for a very important Ford program that we'll release real soon. So very exciting day for us. The start of really a new chapter for us.
Let me ask you this, David, as a backup to that. I think a lot of business owners really struggle with, when do I invest in technology that could move the company forward, but also come at a significant capital expense? And so there's the advantage of, hey, there could be ROI in this, but like any machine, we know, and any entrepreneur, we know that there's risk. How do you know when the right time to lean in and pull the trigger on a brand new 5-axis machine, or whatever that version has been over the years of your business?
Yeah, I mean, this one was a little bit easier because we got a particular business deal that justified it.
Sure.
So, that's the easy one. But I'll go back to like 2007 when we were shipping all of our wheels. We didn't do our own powder coating, and we had to send all of our centers and wheels up to a place up in Troy to do all our powder coating. So we'd have to pack everything up, send it up there, wait for it to get done, bring it back. There'd be 3 or 4 pieces that we reject. We'd have to send back up to Troy. So it really was delaying build times, and then really couldn't get the quality that we really wanted to do. But the powder coating equipment itself was relatively expensive. But it just really got to a point where we said we need to get this under our own control, to reduce our build times, if we're really going to be able to move forward. Because people want the racing wheels, they need them next weekend.
Sure.
They don't have the time to send them up back and forth. So we made the investment of big investment of time and money in that powder coating, and we recovered that within like a year and a half. I mean, it was the best thing we've ever done. So I look at all that type of things, anything that we can bring in-house and do ourselves instead of shipping it out is usually a pretty big payoff at a certain point on it.
So being in business as long as you have, you guys have had some ups and downs, and it looks like you guys have really talk about having a niche market. And Tony does executive coaching, and he can probably just nod his head in agreement that the more niche you're able to do, the more security that you have in the industry. That's just an observation. I want to ask about, because there's people out there that have not been in business very long, and they might just be a one-man shop, or they might call themselves a mom and pop shop. There has to be some things that you've endured that maybe even scared the heck out of you. You weren't expecting it. I use the term, something jumped out of the bushes that you weren't expecting. And you had to think on your feet for the survival of the business to solve that problem. Can you think of one specific example of something that was unexpected that jumped out at you that you thought that made you pause, and you might have had to pump the brakes for a minute and try to figure out how to navigate it?
So yeah, man, COVID's one for sure, and I'm sure. I mean, anybody can say that. I didn't think anybody was, the whole COVID thing. Nobody's going to want to buy wheels. What's going to happen? We had to lay half our staff off. With in our business, the exact opposite thing happened. I mean, the exact opposite. Our business, after about 4 weeks of COVID, our business absolutely exploded. Absolutely exploded. To the point where we were 15, 16 weeks behind in production, couldn't keep up.
Wow.
Couldn't get inventory in fast enough and that type of stuff. So trying to react and then worrying about, we're going to hire all these employees in and this isn't going to last. How long is this really going to last? That type of stuff. So, thinking of being scared to death I was going to lose my business literally overnight, and then having to respond in a completely different manner and build the business and hire the employees and get some more machines. I think we bought 6 machines during that 3-4 year period just to keep up. So those are some exciting times.
Let me ask you this, kind of along the same lines. If you could go back in time and talk to that young entrepreneur who's just taking the business over for the very first time, you're really getting everything started. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice to that younger, more brazen version of you, the one that's still fighting with his brother, if you could go back in time and give himself one piece of advice, what would you tell him about running a Forgeline racing wheels?
To trust your gut a little bit more, not be so hard on yourself. I'm very, very critical on myself and my worst critic. I get myself up in a tizzy on things that I probably shouldn't, and it always your gut it's going to tell you to do the right thing, and as long as you follow through, it almost always comes back on top. So don't worry about it so much.
I love when Tony sneaks in that question, because that really forces you to get down to, what was it like when you started and think back. Let me, I'm going to steal a question from Ryan Hawk. Tony and I are both huge Ryan Hawk fans. He's coming up in a future episode of the podcast, but he started asking this question, and I absolutely love it. And he gives credit to the gentleman that he heard the idea from, and next show I'll make sure I know that right there to give credit where credit's due. But he said, Tony and I are going to hand you a bottle of champagne, and it's got to stay on ice for 1 year with the sole intent purpose of celebrating something, a milestone, an event, a breakthrough, an acquisition, something 1 year from now, which would put us at the end of March of 2027. What are we going to be celebrating with that bottle of champagne, Dave?
We're we're going to be selling that machine that we just got is the start of a really big OE program with a very, 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 very cool car. We'll be releasing that, and so getting that's going to take a couple of months to get up and running and full production and get that thing, and it's very intimidating, and it's my general manager, my engineer, we're all a little bit worried about how all this is going to go. I know it's going to go fine, but it's a huge huge project, and when we get on the other side of it and everything's going well, we're definitely going to celebrate that.
All right, last question for me, and I'm going to ask you what might be the hardest question of the whole podcast, and it's 2 parts. The first part is easier than the second part. The first part is this: tell us your dream car.
Ooh.
There's so many.
That's why it's hard. Listen, David, if you want the easy questions, don't come here. We're hard-hitting journalists.
No softballs here, Dave.
Yeah, man. That's my dream car. Probably a 93 911 Turbo S.
I love it. What color?
Guards red.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Okay, the last question, probably the hardest. We love to lift up other business owners. We schedule them out. We want to meet them. We can't meet them all without referrals. So who are 2 people in your world that you're like, you should absolutely ask them some of these hard-hitting questions?
Yeah. That are here from Dayton?
The Dayton area, yeah.
Yeah, you've already interviewed a bunch of them.
Yeah, we have. We could go as far north. If that powder coating business in Troy's still open, I'd go as far north as Troy.
Yeah, it's, aesthetic finishers. So yeah,
Okay.
that business has exploded over the years. They're a much bigger business than they were when we used them.
Wow.
So yeah, so that might be a decent choice. They've done very, very well with that business for sure.
And the second one?
And I don't know these gentlemen, but you heard of Norwood Medical?
No.
So we just got that machine in, and it's a very, very expensive large machine. The people that were bringing in the machine says they have over 500 of them.
Wow.
Wow.
So I can't even imagine that.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Greg, any closing thoughts?
No, I'm just really.
I got another one. Do you know McGowan Brabender?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So like Scott McGowan.
Love Scott. Great idea.
Yeah, Scott McGowan would be great.
That's a great one right there. I can't believe a lot of the guests that we have had thus point know Scott. That is a great one. We're going to make that happen right there. No, Tony, I don't have any other further questions. I just want to thank Dave for taking time out and investing in business owners, because for as much as we got to learn about what you do and the widget that you create and the precision that it takes, you really imparted with some information that someone's going to walk away with, and it's going to help somebody in business. So I'm really thankful that you took that time out, sir.
Well, thank you. It was great.
Well, friends, that's our podcast for today. As always, we're forever thankful for you, the entrepreneurs that make up our community. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening to the podcast. And we can't wait to see you guys next week on the Ohio